Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Scott. I'm glad there's going to be some laugh lines here tonight. So.
Yes. For sure.
Thank you, brothers, sisters, and friends. It is my honor to accept your nomination as NDP candidate and your next member of Parliament. Over these last 2 years in Stratford, I have been incredibly fortunate to find a community of warm acceptance and solidarity, and to make so many firm friends, some of whom are here tonight. It's a community where neighbors look out for each other and where volunteering for good causes is a way of life. And I'm proud to call this city home. And I'm glad to see that we have members from across the riding here tonight, from St. Mary's, Listwell, Palmerston, Mount Forest, to name a few. I made a commitment when I agreed to stand that we would go into every community in Perth-Wellington to hear concerns at the door or on the phones or in person, to hear concerns and to share our message of solidarity and hope. We have many dedicated, lifelong New Democrats in our communities, and I'm counting on all of you to play a vital role on this campaign. We know that as New Democrats, our strength is people. Not the billionaires and the 1%, not the powerful corporations like SNC Lavalin, but ordinary Canadians who will fight for a better country and a better world. We reject the politics and the parties of elites in favor of collective action to build the economy, the environment, and the social safety net we know is possible. It was this attitude that drew me to the party when I read about our founders as a high school student, half a lifetime ago now. As they face the crises of the Great Depression, so we face a crisis of huge magnitude, climate change. People are afraid for their future, but they're also fearing the consequences they're seeing now. Climate change has arrived in Perth and Wellington counties, and it's farm families that are bearing the brunt. A lot of farmers couldn't get their seed in the ground until the second week of June because of the wet spring, if they even had a season at all. Along with the extreme weather events that we're seeing across Canada, this is the new reality of climate change. Unfortunately, we don't have a government that's on the side of farmers or of the climate. They negotiate away farmers' livelihoods in secretive trade deals and only offer compensation after the fact. Meanwhile, they're more than happy to bail out big oil for billions of dollars and leave us with the bill for a pipeline project that was only ever intended for private profit and will never be built. The Liberals' idea of climate action is subsidizing the wealthiest corporations and the industries that are driving up Canada's greenhouse gas emissions at a time when the world is depending on us to choose a different path.
Shame.
Then there's Andrew Scheer's Conservatives. If they had a plan to combat climate change, even an inadequate plan, it would at least show that they're living in reality. But their so-called real plan is not worth consideration. Stephen Harper's targets, which are now Justin Trudeau's targets, funny how that works, and perverse incentive for big polluters to keep on polluting, in fact to pollute more, so that they can benefit from climate research while average Canadians are left no better off. We expect better from somebody who wants to be Prime Minister. We expect leadership from our government, and we expect urgent action when Canadians are at risk. Thankfully, there's Jagmeet Singh and the NDP's climate plan, Power and Change. It is the only plan on offer that proposes a Green New Deal for Canada.
Yes.
We're going to create 300,000 new jobs in the clean energy sector in the next 4 years. We're going to invest in electric vehicles built right here in Canada.
Yes.
We're going to be an enthusiastic partner with the municipalities and provinces to invest in low-carbon, accessible, and fare-free public transit. And I want, yeah. And I want to point to the party's plan to reestablish rural bus routes and expand bus service in rural communities. We're going to green the grid. We're going to move to renewable energy from coast to coast to coast, and we're going to fund retrofits for every building in Canada so that they're net zero ready by 2030. And by the way, those retrofits are going to save the average family $900 a year in energy costs. That means nobody in Canada having to choose between buying groceries and keeping the lights on.
Yes, yes.
I've heard some people say that these targets are unattainable, that they're impossible, that it simply can't be done. But the fact is, we have to try. We have a responsibility to my generation and the generations coming after us to act now so that we have a fair country on a livable planet. And as we face up to the challenge, we remember the watchwords of Jack Layton: don't let them tell you it can't be done.
Yes.
I was having a conversation with a woman in Mitchell. It's a conversation that's becoming more and more commonplace across the country. She was telling me that she couldn't afford to look for housing closer to work in Stratford because the anxiety medication she needed cost $600 a month. That's more than half of her net income. It is a travesty that in 2019, huge pharmaceutical companies continue to rack up profits from the pain and illness of Canadians.
Yes.
According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, pharmacare would save Canadians $4.2 billion a year. So we're talking about easing people's pain, building a healthier society, and saving $4.2 billion for the public purse. And that was the conclusion. That was a conclusion that was reached independently by a committee dominated by Liberal MPs. But that's not good enough for Justin Trudeau, Bill Morneau, and their corporate backers. They say we can just fill in the gaps around private insurance. That is wasteful, and that's not how we do things here in Canada. Tommy Douglas and the architects of the Medicare system we cherish always envisaged that pharmacare, dental care, and vision care would be part of a universal program. And only the NDP, the party that gave us Medicare, will make that vision a reality and cover every Canadian from head to toe.
Yes.
For too many Canadians, living with mental health challenges is a barrier to living a full life. And too often, the effects of trauma and inequality lead to addiction. This affects people in all walks of life, we know, including, shamefully, our veterans and members of our armed services. The NDP promises that finally, mental health will be included in universal health care across Canada. We will also be declaring a national health emergency to tackle the opioid crisis that is ravaging our communities. As it stands, Canada has the lowest proportion of social and cooperative housing in the OECD. Lower income Canadians and so many young people are locked out of every housing market in Canada. One of the first commitments that Jagmeet Singh made as our leader to Canadians was to build 500,000 new co-op, social, and below-market housing units. Finally, we have leadership that it recognizes not just the right, but the crying need for every Canadian to have a decent home. we have the political will, we can end homelessness within a decade. And you know what Tommy Douglas once said about Liberal governments? The federal Liberals' problem is that they have a wishbone where they should have a backbone. But even those who are able to secure housing can suffer food insecurity. Many have precarious or no employment. Many rely on social assistance. And here in Stratford, of course, we're incredibly blessed to have a pioneering community food center, such as the local. The presence of community access markets in Stratford and St. Mary's and surrounding area provide folks of modest means with access to local, nutritious food. The presence of nutritional education, community agriculture, and grassroots advocacy are central to our battle against poverty. That is why the NDP's New Deal for People commits to a national food strategy that encourages the expansion of community food hubs to connect farmers, other local producers, and their communities so that everyone has access to nutritious food. Central to the sustainability of our food system is support and respect for our farmers. New Democrats are committed to protecting supply management and investing in modern communications infrastructure, like high-speed broadband in rural communities. To make it simpler for women and young people to build a life on the farm, we'll establish low-interest startup loans, and we're going to tackle the unfair tax treatment of family farm succession so that it's easier for family farms to stay in the family. Everybody here tonight knows that our priorities are going to be different from the other parties, and in government, our choices will be different choices. Liberal and conservative governments have spent decades catering to the 1%. We're going to put a stop to the sweetheart deals that allow multinational corporations to dodge their taxes. We're going to close the loopholes in our tax system that allow massive wealth to be hidden offshore. And we're going to ask the multimillionaires and billionaires to pay a 1% tax on all wealth over $20 million.
Yes.
In this country, 86 families own as much wealth as 11 million Canadians combined. It's long past time to put the needs of the many ahead of the greed of the few.
Yes.
Canadians deserve a government that reflects the will of all of its people. When he campaigned in 2015, Justin Trudeau promised hundreds of times that that election would be the last under first past the post. Thousands of Canadians, especially young Canadians, voted for Trudeau in the hopes that in the future every vote would count. My generation, we have a funny thing. We believe that 39% of the vote shouldn't equal 100% of the power. The NDP has been fighting for proportional representation since our inception, and Jagmeet Singh has made it clear that proportional representation will be an immediate priority. Any support from the NDP for a minority government will be dependent on introducing a proportional voting system.
Yes.
We want to restore the broken trust of citizens in our democracy and let the Liberals know we won't be fooled again. And I have to acknowledge that I stand here today because of the lifelong, unwavering support of my family, my dad, my mom, and my brother Miles. They were able to function as a single-income family and made huge commitments to ensure that I had the very best of the resources I needed. Even though I had tremendous advantages, it would not have been possible without Medicare, and my experience with cerebral palsy makes me acutely aware of the struggles of activists in the disability community, both inside and outside our party. I am a socialist because I know that gestures towards equality and platitudes are not enough to fight grinding systemic discrimination. We need complete system change. It makes me proud and humbled to be among what is surely the most diverse group of NDP candidates that we've ever seen. Activists from the disability community, racialized communities, especially women of color, the LGBTQ community, and Indigenous activists like Chief Rudy Turtle of the Grassy Narrows First Nation are running to make sure that the Government of Canada reflects the lived experience of its people. At our most recent convention in Ottawa, I saw delegates from across the country who had faced systemic barriers to the political process finally find a party that championed their values and affirmed their experience. I have to tell you, I'm running to win in Perth-Wellington.
Yes.
But it's not about me, it's about all of us. And that's why I'm asking us to campaign a little differently this time. We're going to win this riding by having more conversations with more voters one-on-one than ever before. And in a riding of our size, that means our team will need to be open to engaging on the doors, on the phones, on main streets, and online. I'm asking you to believe that our efforts can and will make a difference. Our campaign begins right now. We can achieve our common goal working together. We can fight the climate crisis. We can bring universal pharmacare to Canadians, and we can build a fair economy for working people. In the words of Tommy Douglas, courage, my friends. It's not too late to build a better world. Thank you.